Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz Podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 342, and today's guest is Matt Weinberg, partner at Max Ventures. Did you know that there's a ton of resources available for startups from the government, including non-dilutive funding? I'm talking billions of dollars are allocated to hundreds of startups every year. This is a topic that has never been discussed on the VentureFizz podcast before, and Matt is uniquely qualified to speak about this topic based on his experience in the public sector, including his time at the Small Business Administration's Office of Investment and Innovation. Matt shares some very useful information about the pros and cons of exploring this potential funding path, which includes information from organizations like the National Science Foundation's SBIR program. Today, Matt is in the private sector as a partner at Max Ventures, an early-stage venture firm based in New York City with a global reach and a primary focus on digital health, SaaS, and digital commerce. The firm has also co-founded 8 venture-backed companies. In this episode of our podcast, we cover lots of great topics, like Matt's background story and getting his career started in government under the Obama administration, how his various positions in the public sector helped him take his career into venture capital, joining Max Ventures in the early days of the firm, and how it differentiates itself from other VC firms in terms of both investing and incubating its own companies, the details about the Post and Elion, 2 of the companies it has founded and launched, how to get on Matt's radar and what he expects to get out of a first meeting, the benefits of small group dinners, and some tips for success, and so much more. Okay, quick side note. As mentioned, this is episode 342 of the VentureFizz podcast, and shockingly, we've never had a real sponsor for this program. However, that is about to change, as we will be announcing our first sponsor very soon, which I'm so excited about. The good news for you is that there is still an opportunity for another sponsor to get involved. So if you are interested in marketing your company's brand and product or service to a very targeted audience of individuals in the tech industry, please send me an email at podcast@venturefizz.com. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with Matt. Matt, thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to be here, Keith. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm excited to talk to you. We've got a lot to talk about as far as your professional journey, obviously all the great work you're doing as a venture capitalist. But one thing that's very unique that has never been discussed on the VentureFizz podcast is what I've learned was one of the largest opportunities to secure capital for your company is through the public sector, which is something that no one ever talks about. I'm like, why aren't more people talking about this as an opportunity to raise, capital for your company to keep it going? So, why don't startups explore this as an option more? And how do you actually do it? The public sector raise capital, what's available?
A good meaty question for the opener. Keith, you're definitely right that there's a tremendous amount of resources available on the public sector side for startups, for early stage technology companies, for entrepreneurs that fit a certain profile. I think some of the barriers to it are knowledge. I mean, the government tends to be a poor marketer. When I spent time in the Obama administration, a lot of my job was actually getting out into the community and articulating all the different various funding programs that we have and who they were available to and how you should apply and how you should access them. And I was going to places like South by Southwest. I was going to really, cool tech conferences around the country, not just going to, university labs and more buttoned up finance conferences and even like technology conferences that were more outdated. I mean, we were trying to serve a contemporary audience. So I think marketing is one. 2 is they're hard to get, and there's a lot, and so everything's nuanced, against all the different grant opportunities and funding opportunities. But they are complicated. It does take a lot of time. It takes some resources to apply for these grants and these funding opportunities. So if I'm a startup and I'm looking at capital, sometimes it might be even easier to go for an angel, early stage investor, a VC, an accelerator, incubator, or go for a government grant. And then 3 is, I think, in addition to the marketing, not knowing where they are, what they are, the actual difficulty of applying for these grants. 3 is they're always changing, right? So there's new opportunities that emerge depending on not only the federal level, the whoever's in the White House, that's going to drive agenda. Obviously, Biden is probably going to create more opportunities, definitely going to create more opportunities for stuff like emerging technology and energy efficiency, climate change. I mean, the IRA is a huge bill oriented towards a lot of those profiles of companies. And then a different administration might roll those back. It might change the funding programs and the funding mechanisms. And then even at the state and municipal levels, there's a lot of changing funding programs. So there's a lot of statewide programs, even in New York State, that are available for entrepreneurs, even in the city of New York, the municipality here in New York, where I live. There's a lot of different opportunities, and they're always changing. So it's hard to sort of keep a grip on it and to know what is available, what's upcoming, what's being phased out. But could be a good opportunity for a startup or at least a product to organize and then have a really easy funding and application portal for these opportunities.
Because is that the key? You're essentially getting a grant, right? It's non-dilutive capital, which is amazing.
Yep.
But so you got to go through like a grant writing process. Like I know like a nonprofit, right? They have people that specialize in applying for grants to keep their organization running. So is it a
Yep.
similar process where it's just very tedious and a lot of paperwork and process to eventually hear an answer that may be a no?
Totally, definitely can be. There's a few steps along the way that the government, at least in my departments where I worked in an office called the Office of Investment and Innovation. I was a political appointee there in the Obama administration in 2015 and 16, and we sat on top of the SBIR program, which is Small Business Innovation Research Program, and that's a $2.5 billion technically seed fund that the government has really just for early stage entrepreneurs. They really do focus on technology companies. So they're not going to fund the next CPG brand. They're probably not going to fund the next like e-commerce SaaS company, but they are going to fund cybersecurity companies, energy companies, crypto sometimes if it fits the right profile. Health and human services has a big one. So anything in the healthcare industry, education. If you think about the big pockets of spending government, you have defense, education, health, energy. There's early stage funding programs across all of those verticals. So yeah, we did have some screeners, and so you could call and kind of talk to an agent at one of these agencies and just get a sense if your company matched the sort of fit in the profile. And then there's examples, and hopefully the government and especially certain departments articulate what they're looking for, their scopes. There's sort of like mini RFPs that you can kind of get a look at and see if you're a fit. But definitely, it takes a long time. There's a lot of resources, and at the end of the day, I've been on the selection committee to choose what startups get funded, and it's a very competitive and complex process. So it could definitely not be worth it if you're not the right fit. That said, there are a lot of different grants, like I mentioned. Some are easier, some are based on less intense criteria. And it's just about sort of picking the one and then evaluating the risk reward, the time cost, and the likelihood of getting these grants. But you're right, if you do get them, they are non-dilutive. They're basically free money, quote unquote, in a sense, and the government's there to help you succeed. They're not really there to like take a lot of equity. That said, there are some fund of funds and VC funds from state and sometimes municipal agencies that operate more like traditional venture capital, where there is an equity component to the investment, but by and large, it's mostly grant based.
And you said it was 2.5 billion was the
2.5 billion
group
every single year, which
every
represents
year.
about 2.5% of the federal R&D budget total.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And it's
That's
hundreds of
staggering.
startups, if not thousands. I forget the number now, but every year, hundreds of startups get funded through the SBIR program.
Because I know it's a moving target as far as how much do they actually receive as a grant, but on average, is it, a couple million? Is it a couple 100,000? I mean, for 2.5 billion, that's
Yeah,
a large sum of money. So it's got to be
for
sizable.
sure. Yeah, there's phases too. So phase one is typically in the six-figure range, mid six figures to low six figures. Phase two, typically in the low seven figures. And then phase three tends to be technology that the government sees as an opportunity for contracting. A lot of phase three is really prominent in the DoD, which comprises different funding programs across the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, and all the CIA and the FBI. And there's a lot of different programs there. And phase three, it's almost like, well, we funded you from phase one, we saw you commercialize, we funded you phase two, almost like kind of a series A. And then commercialization is seeing significant progress, and the government might want to actually contract with those startups. So phase three could be like a multi-million-dollar contract with the government, which is pretty exciting. Not for every company, like I mentioned, but yeah, phase two and phase one. I mean, if you're a seed stage company or pre-seed stage company, a couple $100K for free money could be really significant. And then if you do qualify for phase two, seven-figure checks, never hurt anybody, especially when there's no equity involved.
Okay, one more question on this topic, then we're going to
Sure,
shift gears. But
no
so if
worries.
you are a founder kind of thinking
Yes.
like I never thought of this, like how should they get started? Should they call and talk to somebody that's part of the team to even see if they're even in the realm of possibility so they don't waste time?
Yeah. I would, if I were a founder and I was like and again, you have to be pretty tech focused. Like you should be working on new technology. I think that's the big delta. It's like, are you making something that's a step change innovation from a technological standpoint? And if you think you are, I would just Google NSF, which is the National Science Foundation, but NSF, SBIR. They have the most, I think, founder-friendly program within the SBIR program. So it acts most like a venture capital where it's like very general. They have a lot of different tech topics. They're trying to create a broad umbrella for funding and for accessibility for different profiles of startups. So I would type in SBIR, sorry, NSF, SBIR, and then you can even search tech topics, and that'll pop up a good list of what they're looking for, which includes, I just did it, advanced manufacturing, advanced materials, agriculture technologies, artificial intelligence, augmented and virtual reality. So it's really broad, and I love the NSF. I think it's a fantastic government agency, especially when it comes to helping early stage companies succeed. But I would just type in NSF, SBIR, and then tech topics if you want to see all the different funding programs they have.
Very cool. Okay, well, thanks for sharing all those details again.
Sure. I could
I've
talk
never
all day
just
on government innovation and government tech. I'm rarely asked these questions anymore. So
well,
it's a
it's
treat,
a
Keith.
topic that's not discussed, so I wanted to break it down a little bit. Now,
Thank you.
and you're uniquely qualified to answer these questions, and we're going to talk about that. So let's talk about your background. So where'd you
Sure.
grow up, and what were you
Strangely
like as a child?
qualified, uniquely or strangely, as you look at it. Where'd I grow up? I grew up in Brookline, Massachusetts, which is a little neighborhood just to the west of Boston. I grew up within a couple mile walk of Fenway Park, and loved my upbringing. I used to not appreciate how nice Boston was, or how sort of, I don't know, accessible and calm it was. But 10 years in New York will do that to you. So anytime you go to a different city, you realize that not everywhere has such a fast and hectic pace. So the older I get, the more I appreciate it. But yeah, I grew up in Boston. I'm a Boston kid.
So how'd you end up studying at the University of Washington?
That's a great question. I went as a child, like a teenager, to Seattle for a couple like camp trips, and I got to like see the great outdoors there, which I think people on the East Coast don't realize how beautiful the Pacific Northwest is. A lot of these East Coasters kind of stop at Colorado, and they think that that is the most beautiful mountain range in the country, which is arguable. Someone that spent a lot of time in the Pacific Northwest, but going to Seattle as a kid, I got to go to Mount Rainier. I got to go to the North Cascade National Park, which is like the Alps of America, absolutely beautiful. Got to the Olympic National Park. Went to the San Juan Islands, which is this archipelago of beautiful islands that reminds me of like Martha's Vineyard, what that must have been like, 50, 100 years ago. There's like nobody there, but it's beautiful. There's like orca whales and seals. And then the city of Seattle, and I went in the summer, mind you, was just this like beautiful city right on the water. You could see snow-capped mountains, and everyone I thought was pretty friendly because it's the summer and everyone in Seattle is really happy during the summer. So which I will realize later is because of the tremendous rain in the winter. But long story short, I fell in love with the city. I always wanted to go to college on the West Coast. I think growing up in New England and being in Boston, it's kind of insular. So I wanted to see something different. And I only really applied to schools on the West Coast, like schools like Oregon and Colorado and Arizona, and getting into University of Washington for me was like getting into a Harvard. So when I was in high school, I was a late bloomer academically, I'll say that. So getting in, I had good SAT scores, but the grades weren't quite up to my caliber. They would be later in life in college and grad school. But getting into University of Washington, couldn't have been more excited. And then got there and just had the best time and really kind of hit my stride academically and never looked back. But getting a sort of grounding in the Pacific Northwest and the West Coast, I think was a lifesaver for me.
So was working in the public sector government, was that always something that you wanted to pursue?
I think I think so. I think pretty early in college, I was interested. I was a history major, political science major. I also liked international affairs. I think a lot of kids probably are like, I want to be a diplomat. I want to, go save the world, go international. And you kind of realize, that day and era, do you speak Chinese? Do you speak Arabic? And I did not, still don't. And so while I was interested in foreign affairs, I think the whole sort of being in the public sector, working in government was intriguing to me. I did an internship in the school's provost office, which dealt with University of Washington's a huge university, and so they have a lot of interest internationally, especially in Asia. So they have campuses in China, in Korea, at least they did. They have a lot of donors from those countries. A lot of students come international from the Asian countries, especially. And I worked in this office that was really dealing with how does a university position itself abroad? I was obviously an intern. I wasn't making these decisions, but I got to see like how a university almost operates like a business where it's trying to expand its footprint internationally. It's trying to attract more students, trying to attract wealthy donors. And so I got to receive a lot of delegations from these countries. And when they would come in, I would, be touring them around the university, and we would give them, really interesting exposure to the university. And so I kind of got hooked on sort of the intersection of public-private sector. But when I left Seattle, I went to Washington, D.C. The first job I got was for a congressman. He chaired a foreign affairs subcommittee. So it was on international oversight and human rights. And so I got to some exposure to the foreign affairs side of things, but really I got to see what it was like to see a congressman in action. And this individual was exceptional. I mean, this is Congressman Bill Delahunt, who recently passed, which is really sad, but he lived a fantastic life. He's in his mid 80s. And I just got to see what a public servant was all about. So this person cared for his constituents. He was kind. He had integrity. And he, really kind of exposed me to life in DC and life on Capitol Hill and really kind of, what was happening in the epicenter of our country from a government standpoint. So I kind of got the bug after being on Capitol Hill. I ended up doing a campaign and then for a Senator Patty Murray in Washington State and getting to see how the campaign side of things works, which is totally different from the government. I mean, the government policy is totally different than politics, which is the business of winning elections and the business of sort of marketing a candidate. And so getting to see that side of it was also very exciting. So I kind of got the exposure to both ends of the coin very early with, Capitol internship, kind of got the government policy side of it. And then working for a senator on a campaign, I got the political side of it. And then I ended up applying for a White House internship, had no idea if I was even competitive for it. Still to this day, very grateful that I received it. And so this was the Obama administration. And like every, kid that was civically engaged during 2008 to 2012, we were all obsessed with Barack Obama, and we thought, that it was such an exciting time and that it would be such a transformative president, which he was in many ways. And so getting that White House internship kind of took my career in a different direction. And I spent the next 7 years in government, and I'm happy to talk about any of those particular jobs, but that was kind of how it started.
Well, we talked about your work in the SBA Office of Investment and Innovation. So the one question I did have, so when you started out under the Obama administration, you were travel staff aide. What does that
Yes.
job do?
I laugh because I think that's the coolest job that you can do in politics. So my internship was in the Office of Scheduling in Advance, and then I became an advanced associate for a year or so. And that office, the super senior people in that office are really thinking about the president's time. So they're thinking, where can we send Barack Obama, President Obama? It's an election year. We're talking about education. Where should we send him? So we're going to send him to a district in Florida that, not only can we go to a school and talk about our accomplishments on a particular policy and education, but we can also, tag on a fundraiser after with wealthy donors in Palm Springs, or not Palm Springs, Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, or, Fort Lauderdale or Miami. How do we kind of structure these presidential travel trips to squeeze the most out of what is really precious time? So the really senior folks would figure that out. I was a super, super junior folk. So I would go on these trips, and basically we had a team that would really set up the events for these presidential travel visits. So, we would make sure that the flag was crisp in the background. We would pick the school. We would make sure that all the chairs were filled, make sure that when you saw that picture in the New York Times, that it looked beautiful. We would figure out what local politicians he should meet with, figure out his movements within a building, where he goes, comes in, he comes out. And it was a really cool job. I got to, ride in the motorcade. I got to go to Air Force One. I got to meet all these really
What?
senior
Wait,
people.
you flew on Air Force One?
Got to receive people on Air Force One. So I only got a
Okay.
tour of it. Never got to fly on it, sadly.
Still.
lot of
That's
colleagues
cool.
did, but one of my jobs was getting to ride in the motorcade. Like I was a motorcade logistics person, which just meant I had to organize all of these staff vans that you would have to pick up at a car rental place, and then you would get volunteer drivers to drive in the motorcade. So I would ask my friends frequently when I would go to these different cities, "Hey, do you want to drive in the motorcade?" And they were like, first they just didn't believe what I was saying to them, and then once I kind of started doing these trips and got to have a lot of friends drive the motorcade, and then all the drivers usually get a picture with the president. And so I have a lot of friends that have one picture with the president thanks to me. So I see it on their walls when I go travel, and see all my friends across the country, which is really fun. So that was a
That
great
is
job.
legendary. That's
Legendary
legendary.
job. And it's cool. Once in a while, I'll do a trip for Biden because they'll have people that used to do it 10 years ago. If there's a staffing shortage in a particular city, they'll send it out. So I got to do a Biden trip recently, and it was awesome just to support, his campaign. But that was what I thought was like the coolest job in politics. I think I went to the least cool job in politics, which is driving offline merchandise sales for the 2012 campaign. And so that was working the White House. I left the White House to move to Chicago, where the campaign headquarters was. I was like the 70th person, I think, that joined that campaign. By the end of the campaign, there were 700 people. It was $1 billion enterprise, and my small part of that world was selling merchandise domestically across the whole country, and sold I think about $7.5 million of merchandise in 12 months.
So
It
this
was a
is like
brutal.
running a merch tent.
This is like, but yeah, this like Biden, Obama bumper stickers, T-shirts. I still remember the SKU numbers on some of these things. Like 0000007 was like the standard blue Obama Biden bumper sticker, just like imprinted, burned into my brain. But it was a brutal job because it was like a national network to manage. So I would send out these boxes and packages of merchandise to field offices because that was a good storefront. So you think about like a field office in Arizona or North Carolina or Minnesota, they would have merchandise that they would sell to their, to people that would walk in the store or to their volunteers or whatever. And it was a good thing to just have a lot of merchandise everywhere. And we'd also sell it at events. The president would go to an event. We would make sure that, we had like a big merchandise stand, and every, dollar spent on merchandise is a campaign contribution. So, which is great for the campaign, but for me, it had to comply with FEC rules and regulations. So everything had to be compliant with Federal Election Commission rules on campaign financing and campaign donations. So everything had to be reconciled on the back end. There's a lot of like physical forms that would come, their campaign contribution forms for like, a $27 t-shirt. We'd have to enter that into an Excel and run it through our system so that it was reconciled and could be available for audit. So painful. I would get like staff carts of boxes of cash and forms just sent to my desk. The mail people love me. And I'd have armies of volunteers and even some of my colleagues and even me like working into the night sometimes, just like putting all of the paper, making the paper into a digital format. And eventually, halfway through the campaign, we figured out a solution that made it a little bit easier on a digital like storefront sense where it was like kind of e-commerce, back in the day, but we were able to do transactions online for that function. But yeah, it was brutal, but it did teach me a lot about. I mean, that's like one of my most operating heavy jobs. So I learned about logistics, supply chain, margins. I learned about labor negotiations, labor contracts. Everything that was made had to be union made. Distribution, supply chain, revenue, profit. Like I just kind of was running a small business. So, and again, it sold $7 million of merchandise in 11, 12 months and grew into something pretty big from zero. So it was a really rewarding experience, but nothing I would do again, I think. So I have a lot of respect for anyone selling a CPG product.
Well, I was gonna say, well, you are uniquely qualified to run like merch for a recording artist or a music label for all their artists, right? But instead, you went venture capital. So how'd you land in venture
Yeah.
capital?
Yeah. So I guess I would have been qualified for that. I wasn't thinking after the campaign, I was like, oh, I should need to do something else. So I was reading a book, how things happen in life, it's really like serendipitous or sort of opportunistic with a little bit of luck. But I was reading a book and it was talking about, because I was, history major, political science major. So I was, into economic development, like the history of cities, like how cities kind of rise and fall. I was always kind of interested in that topic. And there was a book written by a Brookings Institute scholar named Bruce Katz, and the book was called The Metropolitan Revolution. And it was talking about how cities were transforming themselves to become, competitive and innovative to meet the challenges of today. And this is like 2010 or 2011, 2012. And one of the chapters was all about New York City, and it was about how New York responded to the Great Recession, the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. And it talked about how the Bloomberg administration realized that it was way over-indexed in financial services. So, think about a core industry in 2005 New York. I mean, you have a lot of banking, a lot of real estate, a lot of financial services. Your top talent is going to those institutions from, your Columbia, your NYU's, your Cornell's, and they still do, but to a lesser extent now. And your tech sector is probably, third at best in the country, definitely looking up to San Francisco, Silicon Valley, definitely looking up to Boston, maybe looking up to other cities. And so in order to, compete with the MITs and the Stanfords of the world, the Bloomberg administration launched this worldwide competition to build a really state-of-the-art campus on Roosevelt Island. It became the Cornell Tech campus, which today, 10 years later, maybe 15 years later, has almost 100% complete or at capacity, graduating hundreds of engineers a year. I think hundreds of startups have come out of it, a lot of venture capital raised from those startups, but really innovative, to see your city, how it struggled during one crisis, and to be like, look, we're going to make this city more competitive for the future. We're going to make it a hub of innovation, technology, entrepreneurship, and we're going to create this state-of-the-art tech campus that's going to compete, with its contemporary in MIT and in Stanford. So really compete with MIT and Stanford, in a degree, maybe, but it's there. It's powerful in its own right. But all of these other programs, in addition to the Cornell Tech Campus, Bloomberg initiated to help entrepreneurs across all these different sectors in the city. And I'll get to that in a second. But reading that book, I was like, wow, if a city agency is doing that, like that's where I want to be. So I was like, that sounds really cool. So I started networking with people that worked at that agency that oversaw it. It's called the NYC EDC, the New York City Economic Development Corporation. And I met a couple people there that were project managers, basically running tech initiatives for the city, which were, they would have certain programs aimed at certain sectors. So one person was in charge of fashion innovation programs. So they would figure out what are the best programs that the city can create to help fashion entrepreneurs in New York City thrive. That program, replicated across all the industries you can think of that are prominent in New York: energy, healthcare, life sciences, education. Even nonprofit had a team that would think about ways to help them succeed. And then one department did kind of generalist tech and media, and there was a job opening in that department. And I had met a bunch of people in that agency, so I applied and was able to get the interview. And then during the interview, passed through it. I think they gave me a shot because they saw my background. They're like, look, if he can run that merchandise program, and if he can be a travel aide, to the Obama administration, he can handle these citywide programs. So luckily they took a shot at me, but it totally changed my career, because my job before that was more in the political side. And then my job, while I was at the EDC, was very focused on helping startups get access to government resources and government programming, and then creating programming that would be beneficial for startups. And so this is 2013 and 14. And I ran this program called NYC Venture Fellows, which is now defunct, but at the time it would bring together the top, quote unquote, top entrepreneurs in the city, and then put them through like a year curriculum where they would get community with each other, also access venture capitalists in the city. And at that time, there weren't that many VC funds. So the convening power of the city was really important, but it would bring these entrepreneurs into, speed dating sessions with VCs. It would allow them to have access to top business executives in the city. So people that had sold companies for, tons of money would come and, be mentors to them. And then they could also communicate with each other and all the sort of mutual shared pain points that entrepreneurs have. There was like a sounding board for that. And in 2013, 12, 14, these were companies like Warby Parker, Harry's, Etsy, Foursquare. It was just like the all-star sort of, grouping of companies that, looking back on it, it was like, I can't believe that all of these companies were in the same room at the same time. So I got to meet a bunch of these people. I got to meet a bunch of the venture capital firms also. And then, I got to run one big other program, this civic innovation competition, which I basically asked, can you make beneficial technology that will help all New Yorkers? And we, would give out these prize grants for people that could help the city with technology. So I really got a good sense of the community here. I started to, grow a pretty big network with entrepreneurs, venture capital firms, people that kind of circled those entities, like people in the city that were working on innovation, people at the universities that were working on innovation type topics. And so I got a pretty interesting network through that role with the city. And then I went back to the Obama administration the last 2 years. Kind of talked about the job that I was doing at the Office of Investment Innovation, at the beginning of the show. But I was a political appointee, and basically, that just meant that when Trump won, I was out of a job and I no longer had a position. I was part of, like the 2% of or folks of government that usually transition with each administration. And I was out of luck. I had applied to go back to business school just in case. Like I did, if Hillary had won, my boss was a pretty charismatic, special, spectacular guy. He's a guy in his like early 60s, late 50s. Went to Harvard Business School, had run a public company. He was like one of these guys that comes back to government just to kind of do well. And so Mark Walsh, she's a great human. So if Hillary won, maybe I would have seen what Mark was up for and what kind of came next in the government land. But my decision was made for me, and so yeah, left government. Trump's inauguration day was my last day, or the day before, and then yeah, had a interesting summer to hang out and do some internships, and then started Columbia in 2017.
How'd you end up at Max Ventures?
Yeah, so great question. Just like anything else, it's a little bit of luck and opportunity and taking advantage of opportunities when they present themselves. But at Columbia, I spent a lot of time, and I think business school, I think I think my views on it are a little complicated. I think ultimately it's a great experience if you know how to leverage it and use it right. And for me, I was a little bit older going into it. I think I started when I was like 29 or 30, and I knew I wanted to either start a company or go into early stage venture. And I found in Max Ventures a startup that was also a VC fund and a startup that was like just beginning. So we had a Columbia alum introduced me to my partner now, Ryan Darnell. And Ryan had just raised, I think, like an $8 million fund or something around there, or about 8 to 10 million. And we sat down, and it was like April of 2018. And he was like, this is what I'm thinking for Max Ventures. And it included early stage investing. So day zero, pre-seed and seed fund. Also included an emphasis on healthcare. So we're starting to invest in healthcare. Healthcare for me is almost like impact investing. I think there's so much opportunity to modernize and improve our healthcare system that any sort of early stage company addressing problems in healthcare is almost impact. And also intersects with government a lot, which I like. And then third was an incubation component. So that I think is our special sauce, what makes us the most differentiated. But in addition to investing, we also start companies. And so fast forward, 2024, we've started 8 companies in 6 years. We've invested in over 70, all early stage companies. About half have been in healthcare. But that day one, when I was thinking about it, I was like, wow, a start like Max Ventures is a startup in its own right. This is like fund one. And we're going to start companies, and we're going to invest in early stage, pre-seed seed companies. I was like, this hits almost every bucket. In addition to, I would be the sort of number one person, on the ground floor here, and a ton of upside for me if I execute and I'm successful. So I thought about it, and then we spent a summer together. We incubated 2 companies that summer. I think we led like 3 deals, and I was kind of hooked. So after that, I got an offer to stay, and we've been growing our fund ever since. We're on fund 3 now. We're great partners, and a lot of exciting things to come. And hopefully, this is where I am for the next 10 or 15 years.
So what are the details on the firm? Like what what fund are you on now? The stage of investing, the target industries. You talked about healthcare,
Yeah.
particular areas of technology.
Yeah, so we're on fund 3, about 100 million AUM. This fund will be about 50. Investing out of fund 3, just wrapping that fundraise up. Have invested in our first 3 companies out of that fund. Very exciting. Incubating our first one as well. So kind of firing at all cylinders. We invest about half healthcare. As I mentioned, I think it's a split between care delivery, which is technology that's interacting with the patient or kind of more patient focused. We've sort of transitioned a little bit away from that to do more enterprise SaaS investing on the healthcare side. I think it's tremendous opportunity now for healthcare enterprise SaaS profile companies to really succeed and to grow. I think there's a lot of appetite now for bigger enterprises in healthcare to adopt new technology. And we're seeing that play out in our portfolio and in new investments as well. So kind of transitioning from, I think, what's more patient facing to now what's more enterprise facing. So that's kind of our healthcare breakdown. A lot more kind of nuanced sub themes that we focus on, but that's sort of the broad scope of it. And then the other half, I'd say it's kind of generalist technology. I'd say if you think about some other funds in New York, like Primary Ventures, ENIAC, Alicorp, all funds we really like and work well with, Bling Capital, more of that generalist tech component, early stage investing, and then healthcare is our focus. And then again, I think what we do, which is a bit special, is that we are company builders as well. So in addition to investing, we also incubate, which I don't know if that's even the right word anymore because it's have a negative connotation, but I would say once a year or so, we'll get conviction in an idea or in a person, but get conviction in an idea. We'll do our discovery, we'll do our diligence, we'll get confident that it's something we should pursue, and then we will hire a CEO, we'll fundraise for it, we'll hire the founding team or help hire the founding team with the CEO. We'll help it get to market, we'll help the company get its first couple pilot customers or design partners or even customers, and then kind of sit back and be on the board, and it's off to the races. So we've done that 8 times. I think we have a really good good value prop for founders in a sense that we're not just capital. We've built these companies before, we've scaled companies. We know what it's like when things go wrong. We know what it's like when things go right. A lot of shared empathy for founders, and it's helped us get into a lot of deals. And then I think it's helped us be better investors. I mean, it's like driving a car when you've been able to build an engine for it, or like build one from scratch. You kind of know how it runs in a sense, although every company is different. But I think it makes us better at helping our portfolio companies and better at evaluating companies, when we're on that initial stage of consideration. And we make about 8 to 10 investments a year, about 25 companies or so of a fund cycle.
And the companies you're building, instead of like incubator, they call it, venture studio now is like the common term. But a couple examples of those are The Post, right? And Elion Health. So
Yeah.
what are those companies about?
Yeah, both awesome companies. Those are two we incubated last fund. The Post is, I would describe it as like a Soho House meets YPO meets Chief, which is the network for executive women, meets Chief, but for athletes, professional athletes, college or professional, creating the ultimate community for them to come together, meet like-minded people, have access to professional opportunities, access to a really awesome clubhouse space that we have in New York. And we have cohorts of folks that come in, and they get to network with each other, they get to build community, and then they have access to a lot of resources, programming, events. And yeah, Christian Ponder, who's a former NFL quarterback, we partnered with him to start it, and he's the CEO, and it's going great. We launched, I think we launched the clubhouse last year, and already hitting membership goals. And I go in there a couple days a week to work out of there. It's a really fun space, and it's great to meet an interesting community. Sadly, my sports career ended after high school, but regretfully, I wish I was a D1 athlete or had considered that. But it's great to kind of be around those folks. They're very, very talented. Elion is a healthcare company. I would say, when we do healthcare or when we do incubations, there's usually, Ryan or I will lead, and then, support each other for sure. But so the Post was one that Ryan led, and then I was, definitely helping behind the scenes, and then kind of vice versa for Elion, which is a company that I led the incubation for. And the concept came from, I think really fundamentally, there's too much technology in the marketplace on the healthcare side. This is like 2020, 2021. You imagine an explosion of vendors servicing healthcare organizations. Our portfolio companies, being the healthcare organizations, knew that there was a tremendous amount of technology out there that they could potentially leverage to increase operations, cut costs, increase profits, be more effective and efficient and contemporary. They're having a real hard time making technology decisions, because in every sort of problem area, there were 4 or 5 venture-backed companies that were all saying that they were doing the same thing. And I was looking at a site, g2.com, which is basically like Yelp for software. And then I was talking to an entrepreneur who was he was describing a vertical just for retail tech. He was like, I want to create a G2 for retail tech. And a light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, why isn't there some sort of marketplace that helps people navigate healthcare technology buying? And so I went to all my portfolio companies. I asked them, like, is this something that you would, benefit from if this existed? And they were like, yes, 100%. We would use this on day one. And then I went to one of my smartest friends in healthcare, this woman, Lily Huang, who worked at NEA, and we sat on a board together, Vori Health, which is a MSK company. And I was like, hey, Lily, like, I've been getting a lot of positive feedback about this idea. Like, what do you think? And, she totally got it. Her eyes lit up, and she's like, this is a great idea. We should pursue this together. Like, this would be awesome. My portfolio companies say the same thing, and NEA's portfolio companies tend to be a little bit more late stage than ours. So, that kind of represented a need across different growth, or different sizes of companies kind of represent need across the whole ecosystem. And so we started it, we capitalized it, we raised a solid sort of pre-seed seed round for it with tremendous investors, Alicorp, 8VC, Charge Ventures, and Floating Point and NEA and Max Ventures. And then we went out and hired a CEO. And so I thought we had a really good advantage where we had a really well scoped out problem. We had a scoped out problem and like a well articulated solution, but you want to leave a lot of flexibility for whoever comes on board to make it their own. But we had a great problem statement. We had an amazing group of investors around the table. We raised a sizable amount for a seed round, and we were able to attract a top killer CEO, this guy Bobby Gulich, who was early at Oscar, top 5 hired at Oscar, and then was one of the chief executives at TrialSpark. And he was introduced to us, one of the investors, as a potential angel. He's like, "Yeah, I think you should talk to Bobby. He might be interested in being an angel investor." And then we had a first conversation with him, and he got the problem too, as someone that was a healthcare executive, and he got so inspired. He was already leaving TrialSpark, and he was kind of he was going to take a break, I think, but then he got so inspired by the idea that he ended up joining as our CEO at Elion, with Lily and I sitting on the board, and kind of went off to the races. So I think having the sort of support of the community of investors behind the table, raising some of that capital, and then having a really great problem. If you're someone that's thinking about starting a company from the venture capital side, that's going to give you a tremendous chance to hire the top executive, top caliber CEO. And it's really all about that. If you can't hire an amazing CEO for an incubation project, I don't think it really matters. It's kind of the core thing. So that was a great one. If I could replicate that one every time, I would, but not always so. I mean, it's not easy. It was a ton of work that went into it, but it doesn't always work so fluidly, I guess.
All right, so when you're doing more the investing into potential portfolio companies, how does someone get on your radar, and like what are you looking to get out of that like first initial meeting?
Um, I mean, radar, the warm intro just works the best, right? I think if I had a bigger team, and we're going to be hiring at some point this year, but if I had an analyst or an associate, I think I would be I'd have a bigger bandwidth for, I mean, cold inbound, but like maybe not super warm introduction, or sort of well thought out email would work. And sometimes I try to read every email I get, but cold emails, I just can't focus on them in the same way that I would when someone that I know introduces me to a founder. So I think that is just the best way. I mean, I like LinkedIn. I'm receptive. To receiving any email, but making it about us, being like, "Hey, like I saw that you invested in XYZ company. It sounds like you're very well adept in this world, this particular area of healthcare. I'm building this solution. What do you think?" I mean, that's going to elicit a response way more often than, "Dear XXX, here's my company." So, I mean, that's really basic advice. But I think it's just like, if you're hustling out there, you see someone's name on LinkedIn, like I do this all the time. I'm like, who's the person I know that can give me the warmest introduction or vouch for me and get me in front of this person as fast as possible? I mean, there's no real cheat code to that. But I think if I had like a broader, bigger staff, I think could be easier to just sort of get more inbound. But otherwise, yeah, just trying to get someone that knows me to make the intro for you is gonna go a long way.
And then that first meeting, like what do you hope to get out of that?
Right. It's really, I think it's a funny thing that maybe I'm a contrarian, but I think the first meetings could be like 15 minutes. I think it could be like a really quick, like I try to read the decks beforehand, but again, if I had more time, I would read every deck I had before a meeting, but I scan them beforehand. I got a sense of the problem, like what they're trying to solve. And then, I have a really like simple set of questions. I like to keep it pretty high level the first 15 minutes just to see if I like the person, if I see if they give me a sense of trust, they give me a sense of confidence, if I think that this is a person that can really execute on what they're saying, if there's a good reason why this person is starting a company, is there a good reason this person is starting a company today versus 5 years ago versus 5 years in the future? Like, what are inflection points in the market that are making this opportunity exciting? Really kind of core questions there. And then, I like to ask some personal questions just to try to get to know someone a bit on the personal side. But I think, you kind of know 15 minutes into it if you want to have another call. And then, if we do want to have another call, sometimes the calls that are scheduled for 30 minutes, if we both have the time, can go for an hour or so. So I think it's really, just some core questions. And then I feel it's like in this job as an early stage investor, you want to work with these people for 10 years. And I think, I think you can at least like know pretty quick who you don't want to work with for 10 years. But then, I think after the first meeting, like pretty quickly, I'll be like, all right, I'm interested in this person. I'm interested in the idea. I think this person is really capable. They're giving me a sense of confidence and excitement, and I want to learn more. And then, by the end of it, meeting in person is pretty critical for me. And I think sometimes you just get a different sense of a person when you sort of meet them in person, and you're getting a sense of like if they can sell, if they can hire, if they can bring something to market, if they can really execute on what it takes to, be a successful founder, which is exceptionally difficult.
All right, so what's the process from there to actually getting a term sheet and wired money?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I feel like there might be some other funds that have some sort of comprehensive, complex process. I mean, ours is diligent and comprehensive in its own right, but we're really looking for we'll probably do two or three calls. I'd say we want both of the partners, myself and Ryan, to meet the team. We will try to get as many references as possible. Some of them obviously the founders give us, but we like to just talk to people that used to know. I mean, ideally, I want to talk to someone that had managed that person, and then someone that person had managed. And I want to ask, would you still work with this person? Would you, what's your vote of confidence in them? Strengths and weaknesses. You try to tease that out. But I think a good question is like, would you work for this person again? Especially on someone that managed that person. When I was doing this for Bobby at Elion, I think I talked to his boss or the CEO of one of the companies he worked for, and I was like, "Would you work for Bobby?" And that person was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So to have the CEO, like that Bobby was working for, be like, "I would work for Bobby," I was like, "Oh, that's such a great point of reference." So you learn a lot by talking to people that worked with someone. And then what I like to do also is have a customer call where someone in our portfolio that's a potential expert or that might be a customer for that technology. So if it's like one of our care delivery companies, like Heartbeat, which is a cardiology virtual care company, we were investing in a company called Certify OS, which is a credentialing and licensing company. So basically enables providers to service patients in different geographies. So every geography has its own licensing and credentialing component, credentialing being more of the payer, the insurance component, licensing being more of the state, what the government, allows or doesn't allow from a cross-border service. So, we brought them on to talk to one of our companies, and we're sitting in the background, and we want to hear from the company how big a pain point it is, and then what the service is that the new company is offering, or in this case, Certify OS, like they're articulating their product and what they can do and the problems they can solve, and then seeing the reaction of Heartbeat to be, so excited about that potential. I mean, that's really big for us. So you try to bring experts from our network to do sort of interviews with them while we kind of sit on the call and facilitate. And then, that could be really beneficial to both parties because not only is it giving us a sense of confidence if one of our companies is like, this is really good, like this is special, this sounds great. But then the company that we're potentially investing in, it could be a good customer lead for them as well. And so they really like that and they appreciate that. And we really try to help our portfolio companies, at least like sell into each other or benefit from each other. So I think trying to find early customers for our people that we're evaluating really deeply goes both ways to give us information and then give the companies a sense of feeling that we're trying to hustle for them also, and it gives them insight into how we would be as partners going forward. And then after that, if we get confident, we'll collect all the information we had. Obviously, there will be a lot of research and Googling and finding all the sort of secondary information I can get on a market or on a competitors to go along with all the primary research that we did with the interviews and the more people oriented info that we're able to collect. And we'll write that essay or write that memo, and then usually at that point we're ready to invest. So the memo is usually putting the cherry on the top, but I've definitely written myself out of a couple of deals before once you kind of see all the information horizontally. But that's usually how our process works, and hopefully it's pretty quick. It's with a week, 10 days, depends on some of the information flow and scheduling of calendars, but it can be pretty quick.
All right, so it's not, I don't know if it say new because it's not new, but a trend that I've noticed over the past couple of years, maybe since the pandemic, is these gatherings. You see the pictures on LinkedIn of these small group dinners, right? Where, maybe it's a 20-person gathering. So I've noticed that you've been a part of these, at least from your LinkedIn posts. In Max Ventures was one of the, organizers. So I don't know if you were actually doing the planning, but like what are the benefits of these small group dinners that you've seen? And do you have any tips on how to actually pull one off and make it useful?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. I was definitely a planner. as a one of two partners at a very small fund. I'm an event planner. I update the logos on the website. I raise capital. I lead deals, incubate companies, everything from a partner to what an intern would do. So definitely experienced dinner planner. I think we've had some awesome dinners. I think one thing we do well is we know how to convene a great community. And it doesn't have to be a large mass gathering. Sometimes it's really fun, but I think we found more benefit from smaller groups. The last one I did was two, I'll give examples of, but the last one I did was went to Columbia Business School. I feel like there could be more activity around linking people that are LPs in venture capital funds that went to Columbia. So alums that are LPs, and then alums that are GPs, like people that are Columbia Business School alums that lead or are partners at venture funds. And so I was really keen on bringing these groups together. And so I had this idea like maybe like a year ago, and I started just banking lists of when I would come across, maybe like 6 months ago, when I would ever come across an LP that was a Columbia Business School alum, I would just put them in a list, and I would like really, really like curate that list. And 6 months later, I had a good like 30 people that I had just met through networking or through friends of friends or through just like other events. And I was like, wow, there's a really good group of LPs here that do venture fund investing that I feel like not many people have been able to meet. And then on the GP side, there's probably a good like 10 or 15, really strong partners that went to Columbia in New York. And I was like, let's just have a dinner with these people. And, people tend to be, have a shared affinity for the universities that they go to. So I figured everyone would get along well. And obviously the GPs were eager to come and, they were excited by it, but getting, 15, 20 LPs on board and then getting, maybe like 10 or so GP friends that we have from Columbia. We had a great dinner. It was like 30 people. Everyone really got along really well. And there were a lot of follow-ups that were had. I made some really good new friends. We're hosting the next one in October. It's going to be great, or maybe expanded a little bit. But everyone thought it was like a 10 out of 10 event. I think the key to it is like we had a couple really good partners. One of my good friends, this guy Ed Zimmerman, he's a professor at Columbia. He's also the chair of the tech group at Lowenstein Sandler, so he's a pretty prominent lawyer there. And he had a lot of good relationships, so he was able to help get validation for some LPs that didn't really know me that well, because you don't want to cold outreach these people. They're going to think that you're just trying to raise capital or you're soliciting them for something. But I'm actually, no, I want to invite you to a really cool dinner. And so having someone like Ed that could like kind of vouch for the relationship a bit, I think that's important. I also deputized or recruited and think very kindly this one of an LP that came to the event that was also really well plugged in. He was like, oh, this is such a cool idea. And he's like, anything I can do to help? And I was like, well, I see that you're connected to like these 5 people that I want to invite to the dinner. He's like, oh, like 3 of them are really good friends of mine. So, seeing opportunities that you can like augment your own network is really important. And then, yeah, I don't think, there's no cheat code to this, but like just being very, very diligent, communicative, making sure that like the event looks great, pictures of it look good. You're kind of crossing all your T's there. You're being organized. But I think really it's like finding people that can help accelerate, your relationships or help accelerate validation for you is important. And that plays into the other example. So we do these rotating event dinners like quarterly with Andreessen Horowitz with their healthcare team. And we're good at the CRM list building that I mentioned. I think that's important, but we always put potential founders in healthcare that we think, might start companies one day or are kind of senior executives at, bigger healthcare startups, that are in the right age group, I think is important. So we put them in lists and, we're always kind of checking on them. We're seeing, because our job is to get to these founders as early as possible. So we're always sort of checking with them, seeing if they're about to start a company. But a good way to do that is to have a really good dinner. And while we know we have a good list of people that we know, we probably know like 10 or 15 of these people, to get a dinner convened where we could potentially double the amount of people that we know of that profile. We want to work with a fund that has a really good brand or that has spent considerable amount of years and money kind of building up what is one of the most recognizable brands in finance, not even in venture capital. So Andreessen Horowitz is a great example of like someone that we love to partner with, because I love the people that work there too. This woman, Daisy Wolf, and I have been doing these dinners for about a year now. I mean, she's a good friend and we work well together on a lot of different topics, but we're able, I think they trust us because we have a really good healthcare track record in early stage investing. And I definitely trust them. But to do an event with us, I mean, they could do an event with any fund that they want. So I feel like them picking us, is a good validator that they see us as really good sort of early stage company pickers that potentially could lead to future investments for them. And for us, it's great because they'll bring some people to the table also, because, Andreessen Horowitz, she can reach out a bit easier to a potential executive at a company, and they might want to go to a dinner that's sponsored by Andreessen Horowitz. While we have a group of 15, 10 people also that will bring that we had to, kind of build a relationship with over the past, 5 or 6 months, or even a year to 2 years. So, I think it's a really good, you know, really good symbiotic relationship, so to speak, where we're both benefiting off each other. But if I was hosting these dinners, I'd really want to pick a partner that I think can drive a lot of value for me and help me kind of get the right people in the room. But you want to make sure it's beneficial for them as well. So, no rocket science here, but I think we're really good at sort of augmenting our resources and sort of choosing the right people to help ensure that we drive success for these community events, because they're a lot of time, and they're not the cheapest ways to sort of spend an evening. So it's definitely has to have a strong ROI.
I know these are different forums, like the gathering with the Columbia
Yeah.
Business Schools. It's like, hey, wow, you went to the same school and you probably just automatically connected. But when you have founders from different, you know, stages of companies, or they're all in healthcare, but they're doing different things in healthcare. Do you actually have like a program where there's any like type of content that someone's leading a discussion, or is it purely, hey, just meet and engage? Like, how do you facilitate the connections?
Uh, yeah, good question. We definitely, I mean, the Columbia one's funny. We did icebreaker, like, what's your first job? And then we would switch seats a lot. So that was, somewhat good. I think if you keep it under 20 people, you're able to meet most of the people in that room that night. Healthcare also, we'll obviously have people introduce themselves, what they're working on. We'll have a prompt. But you want to keep programming at a minimum for some of these. I mean, people if you get the right, if you're good at selecting the people that you invite to be in the room, they're going to have a lot in common. They're going to benefit a lot from being at that dinner or being in that room, and it tends to sort of happen naturally. I think there is a different event profile which we've done, which we're thinking about doing for the fall, that's more of like an intellectual event, or more like focused on a sort of business content. So we can imagine having a panel or someone really, top tier coming to one of our dinners, like head of innovation at Center for Medicaid Services, right? Like the CMS, where a lot of innovations driven from the government side on healthcare. But having someone really prominent come and maybe give some remarks or be a facilitator. But I think, I think I'd rather have dinners be more casual, where you can really sort of relax and get close to people in a relatively small period of time. And then I think another event profile is like having like a panel or like a fireside chat, where you're really bringing people together that are interested in a specific concept, or a specific thesis or topic, versus that are just kind of interested to get to know each other and network a bit. But yeah, but like there could, there's a lot of different ways to make these dinners successful. That's just, we found that it's been pretty successful to just be a bit looser and kind of just focus on the relationship side.
All right, three apps you can't live without, and can't be Slack, email, or calendar.
Spotify for me. I mean, I don't know if that's kind of a cheat one. But
It's
yeah,
not. That's mine. Definitely in top. It's probably number one for me.
yeah, I mean, not only getting better on the podcast, audiobooks too, but I'm a big live music guy. So I'm a big music guy, and I'm a big live music guy. So it's getting better with like the concert features also. So I'm like seeing these good bands that I curate a lot of playlists, and then it's doing better of like helping me organize for future concerts in New York, which is great. But Spotify, just my jam. Can't use that every day. NPR, I only listen to it really exclusive time, but it's been so habitual for me that I use it while I'm in the shower and then brushing my teeth at night, that like now I can't like I have to get, if my phone dies, I have to like plug it in the bathroom, and like while I'm brushing my teeth, just so I need like my NPR. I feel like I can't go
Ritual.
anymore. Even if I'm like abroad or something, I'm just like, I need my 5 minute, it's like a 5 minute NPR, like nightly news digest. And then it rolls into the local one for New York. So there's like 8 minutes of just great content to catch me up on the day, that takes me through like face wash, teeth brushing, like mouthwash, flossing, and then like perfect timing for my nightly routine, which now is in my 30s, includes like a little bit of like moisturizer on the face. And then finally, like it ends and it's just like perfect, go to bed. So I'd be kind of freaked out if that disappeared. And then what else? There's one, this one's kind of funny, but it's a game. It's like retro, it's called Retro Football. I'm gonna pull it up. It's free app.
Hmm.
and it's called Retro Bowl. And it's like very indicative of like the 1990 like Nintendo NES like football
Techno
game.
Bowl?
Yeah, so there's a Techno
Yeah.
Bowl ripoff, and it's like easy to play. It takes like 6 minutes a game. It just calms me. It like it's not so addictive that I'm like playing it all the time, but it's like if I can't, and there you don't need Wi-Fi, so it's such a good like if I'm on the train or I can't like access anything else, and I just want to like do something stupid, I just turn off my brain. I'll spend like 6 minutes playing like New England Patriots versus like New York Jets like retro bowl game. So it's the only game I have on my phone. But
Do they have like the
it's good.
unstoppable plays like Techno Bowl used to have, like the Bo Jackson you couldn't stop, like
They got some
undefensible?
like it's I don't they got some like deep there's no players that you know. So no,
Mm,
there's no cool it's really no frills, but
got it.
you can slang it. You know, get the right quarterback, you can throw some deep bombs, but it's just like one of those things you do to to turn off for 5 minutes, which I think is important.
All right, podcast or book recommendation for entrepreneurs.
Oh, on the podcast side, I really love like anything that has to do with like company history. So acquired or like how I built this. It's just like so phenomenal to see how all of these companies become successful and all the different stories, all the different like almost missteps, like almost deaths. I think it would give me it does give me a lot of inspiration to hear these stories. That's like, wow, like, it takes so much talent, grit, effort, but like it can happen to a lot of different profiles of companies. There's a lot of ways to sort of get to success. It's not linear. A lot of like great, learnings around failure and 2 steps back, 3 steps back. Like, I just think that is really important to always keep in mind while you're sort of grinding. The book side, I would recommend just like not maybe taking a breath off the business book sometimes. I really find it calming to read like sci-fi novels. I mean, that's kind of my jam at night. It really takes sci-fi novels are really boring nonfiction history. So I just bought a book on James Polk, the president of the United States and during the Mexican-American War. And I'm just like, I don't know anything about James Polk or his administration. So I'm excited to kind of get through that. It really turns my brain off, makes me think about something else. And then a sci-fi book I'm reading now. It's actually not sci-fi, but it's like a collection of X-Men someone bought me this. It's like an anthem of X-Men comic books from the 60s up into like the 70s. And so they're all stacked together in like one graphic novel. And I mean, I read that for like 10 minutes. I'm just not thinking about business, my future, my all my portfolio companies. I'm just nervous about their success. I'm just reading a little X-Men or a little James Polk and I'm going to bed. And sometimes it's a good way to just turn off and sometimes your brain just needs different content.
And I'm gonna double down on acquired. Like I've been listening to it for a while, and I just think they even keep getting better. So I had a long drive last weekend,
Yeah,
and I had the Howard Schultz Starbucks episode on.
cool.
That was fascinating. Talk about just a great story of this brand and how it was built. And, he was so transparent and even talking about like the cups and, they were styrofoam and he had to go figure out how to get cups made out of just paper manufactured. And all the cup makers were like, no way, that's insane. And so he had to find somebody that was going to make these cups. And I was telling my wife because she would write to Dunkin' Donuts and say, "Can you stop with these styrofoam cups? Right? These are just so bad for the environment. It's bad for the humans who are ingesting this coffee that's getting
Yeah.
styrofoam." So like she got a kick out of that. But it's just a fascinating. Oh, I mean, I think it was like a 2.5, 3 hour episode, so it's a long drive or
Oh,
multiple
good.
listening sessions. But I highly recommend it. It was pretty
Is it
fascinating.
recent release?
Yeah, very recent. Yeah, like
Okay.
last 2 episodes or something.
Awesome. I'll download it. I think I got a plane trip for 4th of July. I'll download it. It's great.
All right, outside of work, what do you like to?
While I'm playing Retro Bowl, I'll just be
Yeah,
listening to the Howard Schultz.
multitask. Exactly. Outside of work, what do you like to do?
Love live music. So I got some really good venues. I live in Williamsburg, so Baby's All Right. It's like my favorite venue. So try to go to like indie rock, indie pop shows, which I don't know if it's the most popular genre anymore against all like the EDM house stuff, but I still love like a live rock show. I'm a pretty big jogger, so go for like to get out. There's a good running path along the water around me. Love love dinners and going out for drinks like everybody else, but I can't say I'm like the biggest foodie. And then love hanging with my friends. I finally got like a really good outdoor setup and a barbecue. So I've been doing more barbecues, which has been super fun. And yeah, like trying to do more free reading. That's kind of something I'm trying to emphasize and getting back to some of the historical nonfiction I mentioned. But yeah, it's kind of maybe that makes me sound boring, but live music and friends and the occasional beers at a dive bar. It's called me happy.
Very, very cool.
Travel. I like to travel like everybody else. I'm excited to go. I got a friend's bachelor party in Mexico, which will be really fun for 4th of July, although a little sacrilegious, guess, going somewhere else 4th of July. And then I got a friend's wedding in Toronto I'm really excited about. And then hopefully some beach time and then visit my family in Boston. I really love going to New England during the summer. So I'm excited for that.
Very cool. Well, Matt, thanks so
Yeah.
much for taking the time to walk us through your background story. Obviously, all the great work you're doing, you and your colleagues at Max Ventures, and of course, all the advice when we started out about, alternative ways of funding your company.
Yeah, for sure. My pleasure, Keith, and excited to have done this. Thanks for the invitation and looking forward to hearing it when it comes out.